Welcome to the deep dive. We know you're here because, well, you want to cut through all the static and really understand what's driving global events right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And, if you stand on an overpass, right, like
Yeah.
looking down at a major 12-lane highway during rush hour,
You expect gridlock.
right, you expect noise, movement, chaos.
Yeah.
And if that highway is just completely empty, your first instinct is, well, there must be something massive physically blocking the road.
Yeah, your mind immediately goes to like a collapsed bridge or a huge pileup.
Or a wall of concrete barricades or something.
Right.
But consider a scenario where you look closer and, the road is perfectly clear.
Just pristine asphalt.
Exactly. There are no barricades.
Mm-hmm.
The physical path is wide open, but nobody is driving. And that is exactly what we are looking at today, April 11th, 2026.
Yeah.
Except it's not a highway.
No, definitely not.
We are looking at one of the most critical stretches of water on the entire planet, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And our mission for this deep dive is to decode this dramatic, honestly, almost unbelievable shift happening right now in this vital choke point.
We really need to look at exactly why it has suddenly just gone quiet.
Right. And to do that, we have an incredibly detailed stack of sources today.
Oh, it's a fantastic stack. We've got a primary professional analysis published just today by the Deep Draft.
And that's written by a serving master mariner, right?
Exactly, someone who actually commands these massive merchant vessels. Plus, we're looking at live maritime traffic maps, schematic diagrams of naval mines, official government statements.
And those bridge photographs, too. The ones showing the, red-lit navigation rooms.
Yeah, you can really see the tension in those.
You really can. And looking at these live maritime traffic maps, there is a statistic that absolutely just stops you in your tracks.
It's staggering.
According to the feeds, there has been a 90% collapse in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. A 90% drop.
Yeah, just 10 vessels are transiting under a totally new routing system today.
10. And the strait isn't physically blocked. There's no, wall across the water. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why a vast fleet of massive oil tankers just dropped anchor and stopped, we first have to look at how the physical route through the water has been completely ripped up.
Redrawn entirely. If you look at standard nautical charts from even just a few months ago, the Strait of Hormuz had these very conventional, highly efficient bidirectional lanes.
Like a neatly divided highway.
Right, designed for maximum throughput. But looking at the new routing advisories mapping out the transit today, that system is totally gone. The authorities have implemented something called the Larak split routing.
And the map of this new routing, it looks completely asymmetrical.
Very much so.
It's like the established traffic flow has been deliberately fractured. Westbound vessels are now being pushed way north of Larak Island, like hugging really close to the Iranian coast.
Yeah, and then the eastbound traffic is squeezed into this much narrower southern corridor pushing toward Oman.
It's clear this isn't about moving ships quickly anymore, is it?
Not at all. This entire split passage seems designed strictly to distribute risk. That is the sole objective here.
Because it forces vessels to spread out across a wider area, right?
Yeah.
To mitigate this highly specific threat hiding in the water.
Exactly. And the source analysis spends a lot of time differentiating between the types of sea mines altering these routes.
Right, because there are the older conventional ones, right? The ones that trigger on physical contact.
Yeah, those encrusted iron spheres you see bobbing at the surface in historical photos. We actually have images of those contact mines in the source stack.
And they are super dangerous, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. But as the Master Mariner points out, they exist within the visual domain. A lookout on the bow with binoculars has at least a chance of spotting one.
So a contact mine operates essentially like a physical tripwire you might spot in the woods.
Yeah.
If you're scanning the trail carefully.
That's a good way to look at it.
But the analysis pivots to this much more sophisticated piece of technology, right?
Yeah.
The influence mine.
Yeah, this is where it gets really intense.
So if a contact mine is a tripwire, an influence mine functions more like a biometric smart lock, one that is specifically programmed to sense unique environmental data.
Exactly. Except out here in the ocean, the mine is sitting completely submerged, totally invisible.
Wow. And it's sensing what? Like the ship's magnetic field?
A magnetic field, the acoustic signature of its propulsion, or even the immense pressure wave of its hull displacing the water.
That's wild. It's literally engineered to wait for a specific environmental anomaly that matches a massive vessel.
Right, sitting in the dark, well below the surface, totally outside the visual domain of the crew.
So my immediate thought here is about the mechanics of the detonation.
Yeah.
I mean, if this influence mine is sitting deep underwater and it doesn't even physically touch the hull of the ship, how does it destroy a fully laden, very large crude carrier? I mean, we're talking about ships that are a quarter-mile long.
Yeah.
A small underwater explosion that doesn't pierce the steel seems like it, well, shouldn't be catastrophic.
You'd think so, but the destruction actually has very little to do with shrapnel-piercing steel. It has everything to do with the physics of water and pressure.
Okay, how so?
Well, an influence mine is designed to detonate beneath the keel of the ship. And when it explodes, it creates this rapidly expanding and then violently collapsing gas bubble.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And because water does not compress, that expanding bubble essentially displaces the massive column of water that is physically holding the ship up.
Wait, so suddenly a huge section of this quarter-mile-long crude carrier it has no water underneath it.
Exactly. It is momentarily suspended over a void.
And a fully loaded VLCC is carrying, what, hundreds of thousands of tons of crude oil.
Yep.
So when you remove the support from the center of that structure,
Yeah.
gravity just takes over.
It absolutely does. The vessel is subjected to incredibly rapid and severe longitudinal stress. The maritime term for this is the whipping effect.
The whipping effect.
Right. The ship bends in ways its structural integrity was just never engineered to withstand. So it doesn't fail because a bomb punched a hole in its side.
It fails structurally.
Exactly. It literally breaks its own back under its own immense weight and inertia.
That is horrifying. And the source points out this incredibly grim irony here, too, because you would naturally assume that being on the biggest, heaviest ship in the ocean provides, like, a layer of safety.
Right, but the analysis argues it's the exact opposite.
Yeah. The master mariner writes explicitly that size does not provide safety. It increases exposure.
Because a larger ship displaces a much greater volume of water. That creates a massive pressure wave that is far more likely to trigger the influence mine's sensors.
And plus, a ship of that magnitude has a painfully slow maneuvering response time.
Ugh, incredibly slow. Even if a lookout happens to spot a surface anomaly, you just cannot alter the course of a fully laden VLCC fast enough to avoid it. The inertia is way too great.
Which, brings up a genuine logistical question for me. If these massive merchant ships are so vulnerable to pressure waves and magnetic footprints, my immediate instinct is, well, just deploy naval escorts.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people think.
Just send military frigates to guide them through the strait. Right. But if the trigger mechanism is an acoustic or pressure signature, a standard naval escort wouldn't actually solve the physics problem for the tanker trailing behind it, would it?
No, it wouldn't. And the analysis refers to this exact scenario as the escort illusion.
The escort illusion.
Yeah. We actually have photographs in the source material showing this sleek, gray naval frigate cutting through the water right alongside a massive, heavy, black oil tanker.
It looks so safe, too. It projects this image of total security.
It really does. And look, naval warships are incredibly effective at neutralizing surface threats. Incoming drones, small attack craft, airborne missiles.
Right, they control the airspace and the surface.
Exactly. But they cannot shield a VLCC from a submerged influence mine. A naval frigate is relatively light, it's fast, and it is equipped with sophisticated degaussing systems.
To, mask its magnetic and acoustic presence.
Precisely.
So the warship could literally sail right over the influence mine, and because it doesn't have the mass or the magnetic footprint of an oil tanker, the mine sensors just remain dormant.
Exactly. A transit corridor that a naval force has just sailed through and declared assessed and clear might be perfectly safe for a lightweight frigate.
But the moment the VLCC follows in its wake,
boom! Its massive magnetic field and deep pressure wave trigger the explosion. Naval forces provide a crucial surface deterrent, but they cannot extend a physical shield under the keel of a merchant vessel.
That makes total sense. And it sounds like the technological systems crews rely on to navigate these threats are also just, failing to keep pace.
Yeah, severely lagging.
Because the deep dive mentions that official nautical charts and EVTEX, the automated maritime text alerts that warn ships of hazards, they simply cannot update fast enough.
Not when operating in a conflict-affected environment like this. The physical reality on the seabed changes faster than a maritime bureaucracy can issue a chart update.
So a ship might be routed into a newly established lane where debris or a recently laid mine actually exists, but the warning hasn't even processed through the system to reach the bridge yet.
Right. And the Master Mariner notes that navigation in the Larak Split has shifted entirely from complying with a rigid routing system to just making real-time judgment calls in total uncertainty.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And there is this massive disconnect between the chaos happening on the water and the diplomatic conversations happening on land.
Oh, absolutely.
We really need to look at the political backdrop currently feeding this uncertainty. But before we dive into these specific quotes, I want to make it absolutely clear to you listening that we are not taking any political sides here.
No, definitely not.
We are purely reporting the statements provided in the source material to accurately explain the highly charged environment these ships are attempting to navigate today.
Right, because the geopolitical context is just critical to understanding the operational paralysis we're seeing.
Yeah. So currently, there is a proposed conditional ceasefire known as Protocol 14, or the 14-day window, which is slated to occur ahead of the upcoming Islamabad summit.
Right.
And the source includes a graphic contrasting public statements from both sides of the conflict. We have a quote here from former U.S. President Donald Trump stating, quote, "We will cease all bombing during this window in what I described as a double-sided ceasefire," end quote.
And on the other side.
On the other side, Iranian Foreign Minister Syed Abbas Araghchi stated that if attacks against Iran are halted, their armed forces will cease defensive operations, adding, quote, "For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces," end quote.
See, what's fascinating here is the sheer gap between a political declaration made at a podium and the physical reality on the bridge of a ship.
How do you mean?
Well, even if a 14-day political window is formalized at a summit, the physical risk on the seabed remains completely unverified for the sailors actually navigating the strait.
Oh, right. Because a political statement does not instantly disarm an influence mine that was dropped into the water 3 days prior.
Exactly. The threat is still physically there.
So what does this all mean? If the physical protection from a naval escort is a mismatch for the threat, and the political front is basically paused pending a summit, why are we seeing a 90% drop in traffic today?
It's a great question.
I mean, if ships aren't actively exploding in the strait this morning, are the shipping companies just acting on extreme caution, or is there another mechanism at play here?
Oh, there's absolutely another mechanism. The mechanism forcing the fleet to drop anchor is pure economics. Yeah. There is a quote in the analysis from a naval officer that just perfectly captures this reality. He says, "Mine warfare is not about sinking ships. It is about deciding where ships cannot go."
Wow. So the goal isn't necessarily destruction, it's area denial.
Exactly. And area denial in the modern shipping industry is enforced financially.
Financially, how does that work?
Well, the unverified threat of influence mines drives this massive risk reclassification by the major marine insurance markets, which are primarily based in London.
Okay.
The underwriters assess the geopolitical risk, and they issue war risk premiums that act as basically a toll for entering the area.
And according to the deep draft analysis, those war risk premiums have skyrocketed to approximately 1% of the hull's total value.
Exactly. 1%.
Which, when you calculate 1% against the valuation of modern, very large crude carrier, you are looking at roughly $800,000 in extra costs.
Just to secure the insurance for a single transit through the strait?
That's insane.
Yeah.
When you run those numbers across an entire fleet, the profit margin of the voyage just vanishes.
Yep. It fundamentally changes the calculus from a navigational challenge to a financial impossibility.
And the analysis terms this phenomenon a market-driven strait closure, right?
Yes. The strait is technically physically open. You can look at a satellite image and see miles of open water.
But it is commercially closed.
Precisely. The owners, the charterers, the massive insurance syndicates, they look at that $800,000 premium. They weigh it against the unverified seabed risk and the safety of their crews, and they simply withdraw their vessels.
It's such a fascinating pivot.
Yeah.
Because the decision that paralyzes one of the world's most important waterways isn't made by a military general on a battlefield.
No, it's not.
It is made in a corporate boardroom thousands of miles away. It is translated into a massive insurance quote, dispatched in an email, and it stops a quarter-mile-long ship dead in its tracks, without a single weapon ever needing to detonate.
The strategy achieves its objective entirely through the economics of fear.
Right. But if the major, well-regulated operators, like the multinational oil companies, are withdrawing due to that financial calculus, it really raises the question of who is actually commanding the 10 ships still navigating the Larak split today.
Yeah, who is taking that risk?
Exactly. If the legitimate market has closed the strait, who is still sailing?
The source material identifies these remaining vessels as the Shadow Fleet.
The Shadow Fleet.
Yeah. This is an alternative class of merchant vessels that actively steps in to fill the vacuum when legitimate regulated operators withdraw from a high-risk zone.
And the analysis lists their defining characteristics, right? They operate with highly opaque ownership structures, often obscured through layers of shell companies.
Yes, and their insurance underwriting is unverified or highly questionable, meaning they aren't bound by those massive premiums shutting down the major fleets.
Plus, they routinely operate with significantly lower maintenance standards.
Crucially, they frequently engage in AI's dark operations.
Right. AIS being the automatic identification system, the transponder network that broadcasts the ship's position, course, and speed to other vessels to prevent collisions.
Exactly. By turning those transponders off to avoid detection or, international sanctions, they render themselves invisible on the digital map.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous.
Oh, it is. In a narrow, highly dangerous, and newly altered routing corridor like the Larak Split, a poorly maintained ship sailing dark is a massive operational hazard.
I can imagine. If a Shadow Fleet vessel suffers a sudden loss of steering or propulsion, it can't effectively communicate its distress.
Right, so it degrades the overall traffic discipline and safety margins for every other vessel in the vicinity.
And the danger isn't just mechanical, is it? The source material emphasizes how the primary disruptor on the bridge actually becomes operational doubt.
Yes, the psychological toll is immense.
Because when a crew is on high alert for mines, the cognitive load is just unbelievable. Suddenly, every piece of floating ocean debris carries the potential of a contact mine.
Exactly. Imagine the tension of standing on that bridge, scanning the water. You spot an empty oil drum, or a discarded wooden pallet, or heavy scrap bobbing in the waves ahead.
Yeah.
From a distance, that debris carries the exact same visual uncertainty as an explosive device.
And because you can't verify what it is, you are forced to react. The standard maritime reaction involves sudden speed reductions and sharp course alterations.
Right. Now imagine a fleet of poorly communicating AIS dark ships executing evasive maneuvers simultaneously in a heavily constrained channel.
The attempt to avoid a suspected mine creates an immediate collision hazard.
The analysis refers to the immense psychological pressure of this environment as the master's dilemma, referring to the captain of the vessel who holds ultimate responsibility.
You know, the analogy that comes to mind is being ordered by your corporate boss to drive a heavily loaded semi-truck across a frozen lake.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And you can literally hear the ice cracking under the tires. The executive is sitting in a climate control office halfway across the world, looking at a spreadsheet telling you that the cargo is technically insured and you need to keep driving to meet the delivery schedule.
Yeah.
But you are the one actually behind the wheel, feeling the ice give way beneath you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that framework perfectly captures the legal and moral burden placed on the ship's master.
Because the master always retains absolute authority for the safety of the vessel and the crew.
Yeah, right. Yet they are trapped within this complex web of charter obligations, complex insurance positioning, and relentless commercial expectations from the company.
Yeah. The transit begins under conditions already shaped by extreme risk, and the captain is expected to independently manage the physical consequences of a boardroom's risk assessment. They are executing the passage within what the company deems an accepted level of risk. But the crew are the ones who bear the lethal consequences if that bureaucratic assessment is wrong.
It's an impossible situation.
It really is. So, bringing all of this back to you listening right now, why should you care about a maritime routing shift, the mechanics of sea mines, or an insurance premium spike happening thousands of miles away in the Middle East?
It's a fair question.
It matters because the Strait of Hormuz handles a massive percentage of the world's global oil movement.
It remains the ultimate geographic choke point for global energy.
Yeah. And as the analysis bluntly outlines, Any restriction in transit through this corridor transfers directly and immediately into rate volatility, skyrocketing insurance costs, and immense pressure on global supply chains.
When a choke point is commercially closed, the cost of moving energy spikes globally.
That is a cost you will absolutely feel the next time you are at the gas pump, or when you are paying for everyday goods that rely on that energy to be manufactured and transported.
The disruption flows outward like a ripple from that unexploded device, touching almost every layer of the global economy.
It really does. And it leaves me with a genuinely provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up.
What's that?
Well, we've just examined how a major global choke point can be completely paralyzed. Not by a physical blockade, not by sunken ships or concrete walls, but simply by the invisible threat of a weapon that leverages the economics of uncertainty to skyrocket insurance costs.
Yeah.
If a vital physical network can be shut down purely by market-driven fear, what other invisible global networks are vulnerable to this exact same mechanism?
Wow. That's a huge question.
Right. Could the massive web of undersea internet cables that power our digital economy be the next domain closed through pricing if an undetectable threat is introduced?
Or what about commercial satellite corridors in low Earth orbit?
Exactly. It is a profound question about the fragility of the interconnected systems we just assume are resilient.
Yeah, it really makes you reconsider how stable our supply chains actually are.
If the mere threat of an invisible roadblock can stop a quarter-mile-long ship dead in the water, it makes you wonder what other networks are just one risk reclassification away from their own market-driven closure.
Definitely.
Something to think about next time you see an empty highway.